The Aggies are going to be walking into a hectic environment when they take on Auburn on Saturday.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On the show today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit about Cyrus Allen, his injury. He's done for the year. Where do you go from here? Who's got to step up? We're going to talk about some players to watch from Auburn, but we're going to start the show talking about what Coach Elko had to say in his press conference. And one of the most important things that he quickly highlighted was how the atmosphere at Auburn is going to be tough to play in. So here's the quote from Coach Elko. The atmosphere is electric. Us having to go on the road to Auburn at night is going to be electric. It's going to be their senior day, and I'm sure they are going to want to send their seniors out the right way. I mean, he's right about this. It's not – Auburn's already a tough place to play. And one thing you got to give Auburn fans credit for is it feels like even – if they're not good, even if they haven't been playing good football, even if their team is awful, they show up for their team. You know, a lot of schools, especially knowing they got a solid basketball team over the two, a lot of schools, their team starts to, stink or whatever, and people stop showing up, right? That's not going to be the case here. Obviously, this season has not gone the way Auburn fans, Auburn players, coaching staff probably would have wanted it to go. But they're still going to show up and they're going to be loud. And this is not going to be an easy environment to go play in. Like Coach Elko said, walking in on senior night, that's not, I mean, you don't ever want to go play, against a team on senior night. And I've talked about it, something I talked about a few times last week. Listen, the environment that Texas A&M saw for the Cadillac Williams game, which is still, I mean, even being on the losing end of that was just an incredible all around thing to watch. Obviously it stunk to be on the losing end of it, but the Auburn Tigers are looking for a big win to give them some momentum for next season. That's what they're looking for. And, I've talked about this Auburn team. By no means do I think Auburn is an elite football team. By no means do I think Auburn is the best, is a great team. But I think they're a little bit better than their record shows. And what that tells me is you got to show up if you're Texas A&M and play your best football. We've talked about, and Coach Elko talks a little bit about this. We'll talk about some of the quotes. But, I mean, Coach Elko talked a lot about some of the, they've lost close games. They've lost games because of some turnovers where if they take care of the football, they probably win the game. Auburn is a team, you could argue one of the there's always a team in the SEC that you look at their schedule and they go, man, if two or three things go their way, they're, they got 5 wins right now, or they've got 6 wins right now instead of, 4 or whatever. So point being, Texas A&M, I think the Aggies should win this game. But here's the deal. The line opening up at, about 3.5, whatever it was it 3.5 or 2.5? Let me tell you all that right now. But the line opening up where it did, 2.5. It opened up 2.5. The line opening up there tells you everything you need to know. People think this could be an interesting game. People think that the Auburn Tigers could hang around here. So definitely, it's not going to be a cakewalk of a game for the Aggies in this game. So Coach Elko had this to say about Auburn's quarterback, Peyton Thorne. He said, he has the talent and he has the arm talent. He has the talent and he has the arm talent to make explosive plays. They've been very productive on offense all year. They've been moving the football very well. They had some turnover issues at critical moments in some of their early games that shot them in the foot. And he's exactly right about this. I mean, Auburn, we've talked about, they have moved the football this season. It hasn't been a moving the football issue. It has been a moving the football and then putting up 6 points issue, or moving the football and not, moving the football and not turning it over. So Texas A&M needs to find a way. I mean, here's the deal. This is a football game to me. If you make Auburn turn the football over, I think you should win this game. Now, if Auburn takes care of the football, that is when this game gets a little bit more interesting. And, so that's something that I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to in this game is who wins the turnover margin. And that's what's going to be an incredibly interesting part of this game, and I think could end up making a difference in this game. So, Peyton Thorne, I'm not this huge believer in Peyton Thorne. I think Coach Elko is, showing a little bit of gamesmanship when it comes to, talking about Thorne, saying those things. Not to say Thorne's, the worst quarterback ever. He's just, I don't think he quite lived up to the hype when they brought him in. So, that's just thoughts on Thorne, but he is right. If Thorne takes care of the football, he is capable of playing good enough football to win at home in a game where it's going to be tough for the Aggies, a tough environment. Auburn could win if Thorne plays well and they don't turn him over at all. So, Coach Elko's right. You can't just sit here and bash Thorne. You got to pay attention and know what he's capable of doing. Coach Elko had this to say about Auburn's receivers. It's a talented group. They have really talented players, and he's right. That receiver, we're going to talk about a few of those guys actually in segment 2. But, there's some familiar faces in this Auburn receiver room for Texas A&M, and we're going to get to that and some previous commits, some guys you went after hard in the portal. We'll get to that here in segment 2. But Coach Elko is exactly right. Coach Elko had this to say about his tight end room. Part of the pass game is how they're leveraging coverage and where the openings are. We hit some balls to tight ends early in the year to put them on the radar. Then it was a little quiet. Then all of a sudden they go off. We'll see how Auburn chooses to play us. That was one of the most significant offseason topics that I discussed here on the show was, Colin Klein wants to get his tight ends involved, and he wants to get his tight ends involved a lot. So, looking at this tight end room, you finally saw him play well, and it is funny because I begged for it all week last week, and you finally saw the tight ends get involved against New Mexico State. I talked about Watson and Theo combined for something like it was 180 yards they combined for, or something like that. And so that was that they had a great game. So hopefully Auburn, is however they decide to play it, that the Texas A&M tight ends are able to, play their game a little bit. Coach Elko goes on to say, this year, if we handle our business the way we can and the way we're supposed to, we don't need any help from anybody. You don't feel that from the kids. The kids are just excited to be playing for something meaningful down the stretch. I think that's a great quote because that tells me nobody's pressing just because the Aggies are still in playoff contention and still in SEC championship game contention. Because, you can see that stuff happen. You can see a team go and realize, oh, wow, we have a chance to do something special and press a little bit. And I don't think that you've really seen that happen from this team. I don't think they've pressed, and that's important. You don't want to press. And I don't think this Texas A&M team has pressed, and that is extremely exciting for this team because I think when you press, you lose games. So you don't want to do that. Coach Elko had this to say about the penalty issues. I'm running out of ways to tell them. My frustration became a little evident on Saturday night when it's repeat offenders. It's the same things. I have to find creative ways to get it done because it's not working. And it's true. Texas A&M has gotten a lot of penalties this year. Some silly, some just part of football, But at the end of the day, for a team that is fighting to make a playoff and to make an SEC championship game, those type of penalties will cost you games. Could cost you a playoff appearance if it costs you a game. So, I agree with Coach Elko. I don't think he's just trying to find something to harp on. You have got to clean up the penalties because if you don't clean up the penalties, it gets a lot harder to win football games. It just does. They just help opponents. They make things easier for opponents. On offense, if you get a holding, if you get a false start, it kills drives. On defense, if you get a PI or whatever, defense penalty, it's going to help the other team sustain drives. You got to be disciplined, and Coach Elko's right about that. They got to keep working on that and dial that in down the stretch of the season. We're going to talk about some Auburn players to pay attention to, but once again, the number one player on this list for me is Jarquez Hunter, and we're going to talk about why, if the Aggies aren't careful, he could kill you. We'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. First, I'm talking about our friends over at Roy. Locked On Aggies fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app. You have heard us talk about Roy this season and how they are revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if the player transfers. Roy is helping us keep our team intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. I think that the best thing about Roy, seriously, is the way they're able to help keep a roster together. This is what is great about this. You get your money back if they leave, and this is going to help. If money starts, real money is thrown around in this, it's going to help. It's going to really help teams stay together. Roy's a great thing to pay attention to. Roy is a great platform to go and send money to these players. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase necessary, void or prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. Also want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Those of you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know that I am a massive Game Time fan. I think Game Time is the only place anyone should ever buy tickets. I love how easy the app is to use. My mom and I got tickets the other day to a concert we're going to here in a few weeks. What I loved about the, buying tickets there, which I've done a ton of times, is once again, you see what your seat looks like. You see, here's the stage, here's the field, here's the court. You see exactly where you're going to be sitting, and I love that. I like knowing where I'm going to be. It really is a great way to sit and watch or to buy tickets to watch a game, watch a concert. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Looking at this matchup against Auburn, there are some incredibly talented football players on this Auburn team. They really are. And once again, I've talked about this. I want to reiterate this again. I'm not saying Auburn's the best team. I'm not saying they're elite. They're not great, but they do have some solid athletes, some solid players on this team that if you don't show up and you don't play good football, you could lose this game. And the first player on this list is Jarquez Hunter. The running back for the Auburn Tigers has had a really solid season. On the year, Hunter has, he already has hit the 1,000-yard mark. He's got 1,015 yards on the season. He's got a shot at 1,200 yards if he has a good game against us, and then I guess they play Alabama. He's got a shot at something special. And what's the craziest thing about Hunter's 1,015 yards per carry is he's doing that on 7 yards per tote. It's not like he's just has 300 carries and it's, the yards per carry hasn't been great. 7 yards per carry. He's I think he's the best running back in the SEC. I think you could really make that argument in a league full of great running backs. So, what Hunter proved to you is he can single-handedly win you football games. What Hunter did, one of the games I watched was Auburn versus Kentucky, and Hunter had 23 carries for 278 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. Also had 4 catches for 19 yards. He's a guy, he's not going to catch a ton of passes. You can expect it to be 2, 3, or 4. You're not going to see him really get more than that. He'll have 1 catch in a lot of games. But it's something to pay attention to. But I'm just telling y'all, Hunter, if this run defense does not play well, Hunter can win Auburn a football game with his legs, just like he did against Kentucky. And obviously Kentucky is not a Texas A&M level football team, but I'm just saying if Hunter goes for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, Auburn could win this game. He is someone you have to find a way to shut down. He's a great player. They're going to feed him. Maybe he'll get 6 carries and go for 11 yards in the first 6 carries, but they're going to keep giving them to him, and he's very capable over his next 6 carries going for 80 yards. So, you got to know they're going to feed him. I mean, I think the games that Auburn has won, they've really, leaned, which obviously the only game that they've won that wasn't a, kind of cupcake opponent was that Kentucky game. But I mean, they leaned on them there. And I mean, some of the games where they've close, I think that Auburn's learned to win games. They kind of got to lean on Hunter. So he is a player that you need to watch out for in this matchup. Moving to the defensive side of things, you get to these two pass rushers in Jalen McLeod and Keldrick Falk. Two elite, solid pass rushers. McLeod has 6 sacks on the season. Keldrick Falk has 7. Keldrick Falk, I think, is the guy that's going to be a first-round pick. I believe he is a sophomore. Let me double-check on that. Yes, so he's got, one more year before being able to go to the next level. But he's a guy who I think will be one of the best defensive linemen heading into next season, a guy that many expect to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So, looking at those two guys, your offensive line has to be ready because they're going to be coming off the edge. They're going to be attacking. They're going to be trying to they're going to be trying to win battles with your offensive linemen. And if Falk and McLeod really do kill you, it's going to be hard to, if they're in the backfield all game long, it's going to be hard on Marcel Reed. It's just the reality here. They also have a lot of solid players in that secondary. There's a lot of young, solid players in the safety room and in the cornerback room for Auburn. Some guys that are continuing to kind of get their feet under them. They've got some young players all over this roster, but more on the defensive side, all levels, defensive line, linebacker, secondary. They've got some young talent. So they really do have some players all over the field that can beat you. So the Aggies need to know that. They need to be ready for this. They need to be ready for some of these players because, they really can beat you, these young guys. Then is the receiver room, and that to me is going to be the most interesting part of this game. Because, you got to stop Hunter, but Hunter's going to get his, even if you slow him, he's still going to have 80, 90 yards. But their receiver room, Cam Coleman, a familiar name. He was committed to Texas A&M for a while. Keandre Lambert-Smith, a familiar name. I'm pretty sure, right? It was just down to Auburn and Texas A&M for him, and he ends up picking Auburn. And now he's a guy that I really wish was obviously a Texas A&M player. Lambert-Smith has 40 receptions for 761 yards on the season. He's been really good. And then Malcolm Simmons is the kind of, I think, almost the X factor receiver for them. Watched a lot of film on him as a player. Dude is a speedy player, but he's not your normal speedy player where the only part of his game is the speed. He's a solid route runner. He's a really good football player. So those three guys in the receiver room, Lambert-Smith, Coleman, and Simmons, the secondary for the Aggies are going to have to play well. And Lambert-Smith is the guy that can, I think, gets open based on route running. Simmons is the guy that gets open based on speed. And Cam Coleman's the guy that you throw it down the field 50-50 and say, go up and make a play. A great group of receivers there. They've also got a really solid tight end in Rivaldo Fairweather, a guy who had 297 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season, but he had a much better year last year. 394 yards, 6 touchdowns. So, more touches, maybe not 10 more yards, but a good player in the tight end room. Point is, they have weapons all over at receiver, at tight end. They can beat you with some of these weapons. So you've got to find a way to kind of slow these offensive weapons for the Auburn Tigers. And that is going to be something that is really interesting in this game. So those are the players to pay attention to. Jarquez Hunter, the receivers, Coleman, Simmons, Lambert-Smith, tight end Fairweather, pass rushers, Falk and McLeod, and then some of the young players on that defense for Auburn. Those are the guys that you've got to be prepared for. You got to be ready to slow down and take down. Because once again, Auburn's record isn't great. They haven't had the season many have expected, but this team does have a lot of talent. So you got to be ready and you got to play your best game. We're going to talk a little bit about Cyrus Allen's injury. Who's going to have to step up? Where do you go from here? We'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see the right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. 45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabyte on unlimited plan. Additional fees, taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. So Cyrus Allen is done for the season. Our best of luck to that young man. The injury looked ugly. It looked painful. It looked scary. Hope he's going to get surgery to repair it, or I believe he already had surgery. But best prayers for that young man. Hope he gets to feeling better. But I mean, right now, Allen is your third receiver on this team. 18 catches, 269 yards, a touchdown, and that touchdown was a big one if y'all remember correctly. And you might say, well, Allen hasn't had this huge impact. I mean, how big of a deal is this for this football team? To me, it's more of a big deal because of what Cyrus Allen brings, or because of not really what he brings to the table, but more. I mean, you just don't have a ton of guys right now in this room. I mean, you got a lot of good players, but you don't have a lot of elite players. And now you lose Allen, a veteran receiver. And the question is, where do you go from there? I mean, I think that Moose Muhammad's going to start getting a lot more snaps, which once again, I don't think it's about the talent for Moose. We know how good of a player Moose Muhammad is. It's about, not doing anything silly and keeping his head on right and not making any mistakes when it comes to doing anything crazy. So, I mean, Moose is a great football player. Hopefully he's able to step up and help this team. But the other player that I think you want to see step up if you are a Texas A&M fan is Ashton Bethel-Roman. He really got going, his best game of his career with 3 catches. He's got 4 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown on the season. He's a guy with a lot of upside. I believe that Ashton Bethel-Roman is a player that can be really special. Maybe let's get him in and get him some reps and see what can happen. I think the thing about your receivers is a lot of these guys, except for really Walker and Thomas, can play inside, outside, wherever you want. So, I mean, you can mix and match guys around the receiver room. You can move players around. I don't think that is that much of a concern. But, I mean, I think Bethel-Roman and Moose Muhammad are the 2 players you really want to see step up for this team. And I think at the same time, you also now need Thomas and Barber and Ja'Day Walker to step up as well. Your guys that have, you know what you have in them. You know how good those players are. You need them to step up as well. So, I mean, you're going to need some help. You're going to need some players to step up and help this team throughout the rest of the season. So, it's a tough loss. It's a tough loss because it's a guy who was giving you something, you know what I mean? And now you're going to need either Moose or Bethel-Roman to step up. I mean, there's some other names that can step up as well. Maybe you get tight ends a little bit more involved now. There's a lot of different directions you can go, but I mean, losing a starting caliber player is never good for a football team, especially a team trying to make a playoff push. So this is incredibly frustrating. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. I really, really appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That helps the show a ton. Leave a like, hit the subscribe button on podcast platforms, leave a 5-star review, turn on notifications on all platforms. All of that helps me and helps the show out a ton. So I really appreciate y'all that have already done that. And if you haven't already, go ahead and do it. It helps me and the show out a lot. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day today. Rest of the week schedule on Friday, we'll have a crossover between Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn and myself. Zach's great. Going to be a fun show. Break down this game. So we will talk a little bit about that'll be at the Friday plan. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day today, like I said, and we will see y'all tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.